Sir, I would like to request you our next case-based group discussion, which is on acute vision loss. Sir, Dr. Astha ma'am, Dr. Devya ma'am, and Dr. Karthik sir will be presenting the cases, and four participants are there, sir, which will be participating. The senior residents, Dr. Sarat Alethi from PGI, and three residents from AIMS, Dr. Pillai, Dr. Akash, and Dr. Amrita. I will be introducing them subsequently. Dr. Astha Thakkar ma'am is Assistant Professor, Department of Neurology, PGI. She has got more than 65 publications in peer-reviewed national and international journals and has written more than 10 book chapters. Her special areas of interest are neuroimmunology and neuro-ophthalmology. Dr. Divya is Assistant Professor, Neurology in AIMS, New Delhi, and her special interests are movement disorder, neuroimmunology, and neuro-ophthalmology. And Dr. Karthik is Assistant Professor, Department of Neurology in PGI. He has got multiple national and international publications and has active interest in fields of neuro-ophthalmology and neuroinfections. Our four senior residents which will be participating are Dr. Sarat Alethi. He is 5th semester resident from PGI. Dr. Pillai, Dr. Akash, and Dr. Amrita are 6th semester students from AIMS. Over to you, sir, for the moderation of case-based group discussion. Thank you, sir.
So who's starting? I think it's Dr. Who's starting?
Sir, me, sir.
Yeah, please, Karthik, please.
Yes,
so be brief and Karthik interact and involve the residents as much as possible. Okay.
Are my slides visible? Am I audible right?
Yes, you are.
Good evening. Good evening, and thank you for letting me present in this wonderful platform. I'll be discussing a very simple case, but it was not that simple when we got it. So the patient was a 28-year-old female who just presented to us with a history of headaches for the last 6 months. The headaches were holocranial, throbbing associated with photo and phonophobia. There was history of pulsatile tinnitus. The headaches were usually worse in the early morning and increased while she strained. There was some relief with analgesics. Along with that, in the past 3 months, she also developed blurring of vision with intermittent history of TVOs. It was more on the left side than on the right, and it progressed so much that she had counting fingers near face in the left eye. Her past and family history were nothing significant. Her obstetric and menstrual history did reveal she had some menorrhagias, but she denied any use of hormonal preparations for the same. On examination, she was on the overweight side. She had a BMI of 27.8 kilogram per meter square. Rest of her systemic examination was normal. Her best corrected visual acuity was 6/36 in the right eye and the counting fingers till 1 meters in the left eye. She also had a left-sided RAPD. Now, these are the fundus images. So who are the residents here right now? I think we have Dr. Amrita and Dr. Akash from AIMS and Dr. Pillai. This first question to you, Dr. Amrita. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Can you describe to me what are the fundus findings in this patient? This patient comes to you with this 6 months history of headaches and vision loss for the last 3 months. What do you see in the fundus image?
There is blurring of the optic disc margins in both the fundi. There is one peripapillary hemorrhage in the right eye.
Very good.
The vessels are attenuated at the margins of the disc. The vessels can be seen, but over the disc, the vessels are attenuated.
Excellent. Continue on. Can you see something?
Probably there's a cotton wool spot.
Very good. Very good. Can you
and the papillomacular bundle in that region? There is some. Yeah, I can appreciate that.
What is this? There is something over the macula also. Both the maculas, right more than the left.
Not a star. I mean, macular, but
yes, right. This is almost an incomplete star getting formed. There is some evidence of some X-rays on the right side. So you're right. There is bilateral disc edema or papilledema with hemorrhages. This is an OCT which shows there is disc edema. You can see White represents increased thickness in the RNFL, green represents normal, red and yellow says atrophy. So you don't have any doubt that this is bilateral disc edema with some macular edema also involving and some hemorrhages also. And there is a doubtful macular edema and a macular star being formed. So once this patient comes here, I'm giving you a visual field next. So what do you see in the visual field? I think next candidate will be Mrs. Pillai. Yes. Can you see?
Yeah.
Can you describe to me the visual fields in this patient?
Yes, sir, in the right eye, there is an enlargement of the blind spot. In the left eye, there is involvement of the visual fields in the upper and lower quadrant on the nasal side.
So overall, what is the picture? Well, like you have what is it? What do you have? This is generalized constriction of the visual fields. You're right. There is definitely increase in the blind spot. What you're saying is there is central sparing. There is generalized constriction of the visual fields left more than the right. So what are the differentials that you will get in such patients if you get a visual fields like this?
Sir, raised ICTs, papillary edema.
That's very good. That's very good possibility. So when you have raised ICT, you will always get an MRI done. So this question is for the next participant. I think Dr. Akash.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So Akash, tell me what do you find when I got this MRI done? This is a T2 and a T1 axial. I mean T1 sagittal. Can you tell me the findings in this MRI?
So in T2 axial, there is optic nerve sheath distension bilaterally.
Very good.
There is slight flattening of globe only minimally.
Very
sir.
subtle.
Very subtle,
It
sir.
always be spherical only. It's very subtle. Yes.
Very subtle. There, other than that, there is in a T2 to this. Then
This is the right one. Is a T1.
yes, sir. In T1, there is no loss of flow. There is loss of flow.
So there is. See, if you zoom in the images, you're right. You are like you have optic nerve sheath distension. The optic nerves tortuous, and you see that there's an empty cella. This is T1. And when you get a patient of raised intracranial pressure with papillary edema, you always need to get a venogram. What you see on the venogram is there is attenuation of the left transverse sinus. This is the hypoplastic transverse left transverse sinus. This is quite normal. But how do you differentiate between hypoplastic left transverse sinus and a CVT in the left transverse sinus?
There in T1, so we would get a loss of flow void. So in either we can get a MRV done, which will show something.
MRV. This is an MRV only. This is it will be very difficult to say hypoplastic or there's a chronic CVT in this patient. So you may need this MRV might be just inadequate. If you ask an experienced radiologist, they'll ask for 2 or 3 more sequences. They'll ask for more sequences. So it's very commonly misdiagnosed. Like this can be misdiagnosed for a transverse sinus thrombosis. This can be misdiagnosed as an acute CVT or a hypoplastic. So there are many differentiating points between thrombosis and a transverse sinus hypoplasia. That is what I'll give you as a homework. This is the maximum passive learning that you can take. But you can go back and read what are the different ways. How can you differentiate between transverse sinus thrombosis and a hypoplastic left transverse sinus? Because these are very common. Left transverse sinus hypoplasia is very commonly that you see across your day-to-day practice. So what are the possibilities? Akash, I don't think there's much differential. You have a normal MRI apart from signs of raised ICT. You have a young female coming with bilateral disc edema. So what do you think it is?
Mostly it is a case of intracranial hypertension, and if we have ruled most importantly press and CVT, I would keep and idiopathic. Yes, sir.
So this is what we have. This is what you have to approach a patient of bilateral disc edema or signs of raised intracranial pressure. This is the formal flowchart that you get. First, as you correctly pointed out, you have to measure the visual acuity, visual field, fund a detailed clinical examination, rule out malignant hypertension, because when you see a macular star and disc edema, you always have to rule out. Initially, when this patient was seen in the ophthalmology department, they have only one extra instrument that they don't even have a step. They only have a blood pressure monitor over there. If they see a disc edema with macular star, they always try to check the blood pressure. And once you ruled out malignant hypertension, you do a brain imaging. You do a contrast brain imaging with a venogram. You have to get a venography to rule out CVT. If there is no intracranial lesions, then you have to do a lumbar puncture. If you get the lumbar puncture, you will get the raised CSF pressure that is more than 25 centimeters in females, and the constituents of the CSF should be normal. That is, there is no increase in cells, there is no increase in proteins, the sugars are absolutely normal. Cultures, especially for Cryptococcus and VDRL and other infections, should be ruled out before you label it as an idiopathic infection. And you have to rule out other causes of secondary causes before you actually label as an idiopathic intracranial hypertension. Now, if the visual blurring is very rapid onset, if it's fulminant, then you actually say it is a fulminant type of intracranial hypertension. That is less than 4 weeks. And if this is a typical case, that you have a young female in the reproductive age group, obese, you have a BMI of more than 30, then you say this is a typical case of IH. But if you're not seeing, if you're seeing this in a patient who is a male, who's an elderly female, or who's in a non-reproductive age group, or who is a thin-built female or thin-built individual who does not fulfill the profile of a typical IH, this is a red herring. You should always look for secondary causes. So we had the patient was a little bit obese. She had 27 BMI. She had some mild anemia because of her uterine fibrosis and menorrhagia. She had iron deficiency anemia. Rest of her endocrinological workup, vascular workup was normal. Her opening pressures, if you see, were 40 centimeters. That were very high. There were the CSF was absolutely normal. So we drained her CSF. We started her on topiramate and acetazolamide, but her vision loss continued to progress. So what do you do? The vision loss is still progressing. The patient is still losing vision, even if you're starting treatment, even if you're drained the CSF. So what is the next line of action? Next is Dr. Sharath.
Yes, sir.
So what do you want to do next in this patient? So would you like to give steroids? What do you do for CSF diversion procedures?
Sir, in fulminant stage, we will give steroids when the patient presents to us with vision loss, and after that, we do a VP shunt procedure, which would take care of the raised SAP.
Very good, very good.
Yes,
So steroids are not a long-term or a mainstay of treatment in this patient. They are just a time-buying. That is a time-buying procedure. Steroids, CSF daily drainage. They just give you time unless and until you do the definitive surgeries. That is CSF diversions. So there are many types of CSF diversion procedures that you can do. More commonly being thecoperitoneal or ventriculoperitoneal shunts or an ONSF. So in which procedure do you do a theco or ventricular peritoneal shunt or an ONSF? So the rule of thumb is if you have a headache predominant disease or you have signs of raised ICT which are more predominant, go for a thecoperitoneal or ventricular peritoneal shunts. But if you have vision loss which is much more severe, then go in for an ONSF. But again, depends on what kind of surgical expertise do you have available. If you have very good neurosurgeons, very cooperative, then you can go for either of them. But if you have very good ENT or ophthalmic surgeons, then you can go in for ONSF. So this is the management of how do you follow up patients of raised intracranial pressure. First, if you have vision-threatening vision, you must have to do an urgent. You should not wait for such patients. You should act immediately. You should give steroids or start them on a lumbar drain or do repeated CSF before you go for a CSF diversion or optic nerve fenestration. But the most important thing is you do manage the headaches, you do manage the raised intracranial pressure. But overall, the baseline of all IH management is weight reduction. If you don't emphasize weight reduction in all these patients, there's no fun of doing all such high-fi procedures unless and until you control the basic disease. So we admitted this patient for an ONSF. However, her HB was only 6.8. She had uterine fibroids. So we needed a good hemoglobin before we started on surgery. We transfused her on 2 pints of RBCs. Then she started noticing vision improvement within 2 days. So much so, we had to defer the ONSF that she improved so much. A week after discharge, her fields had cleared up dramatically from counting fingers in 1 meters to 6/36 in the left eye, 6/36 in the right eye to 6/9 in the right eye. So you see the fields are actually improved so much just by blood transfusion. So this was a repeat fundus after 1 month. Her HB was around 8.6. You can see there's still blurring of margins in the nasal side on the right side. There's optic atrophy setting on the temporal aspect in the left eye, as you can see in the OCT. The patient further underwent the excision of the uterine fibroids. She underwent her HB is now stable at 11 to 12 grams per deciliter, and she is on low maintenance dose of topiramate and acetazolamide. This is a latest fundus picture. We have atrophy setting in the left eye. The visual field has actually recovered. She's almost quite functionally normal. We tried to even do an ONSF, but there's not much recovery even after this. So where did we go wrong in this patient? As I told you before, you have to exclude the secondary causes. When you look at the secondary causes, IIH is always a diagnosis of exclusion. When you look at the hematological causes, the most common is anemia. When you live in a country like India, where the prevalence of anemia can go up to 50 to 60% in the general population, specifically iron deficiency anemia, you just have to rule out these causes. Systemic or other obstruction, like obstruction to venous drainage, you have to rule out CVT, you have to rule out jugular thrombosis, and we have to, importantly, most commonly that you miss out is in raised right heart pressure. Sometimes a very good clinical examination is to look at the JVP of the patient. You might not be able to pick up the auscultation murmurs, but recently we did find out a patient of IIH who had pulmonary artery hypertension secondary to ASD. So it is very good to do a good clinical examination once you see these patients. You always have to rule out systemic disorders like CKD, COPD, endocrinopathies, and medication history. This is the history that most of the residents miss out. What do you see in the medication list? Fluoroquinolones, tetracyclines, steroids, vitamin A, indomethacin, levonorgestrel, or OCPs. What is common between all these medications? Can you say what is common? Sharath, can you tell me what is common between all these medications, apart from the things that they cause IH?
Sir, they cause weight gain. So steroids cause weight gain.
Okay, but all these medications are very one common social aspect, that these are all medications which are easily available over the counter. You need not have prescriptions. A female goes to a chemist for with an UTI, he gives her fluoroquinolones. Steroids are ubiquitously prescribed. Indomethacin is ubiquitously prescribed for any body pain. OCPs are prescribed left and right. So these are very easily available in the general population. So all these have to be ruled out when you take in the patient of IIH.
Karthik, I think let's move on. I
Yes.
think
So what are the signs of anemia and of them? Usually you get to start the symptoms when you have the HB of less than 50%, but reports have been known between 3 to 9 grams of HB also. Most commonly you get fundus, pallor, glaucomas, you have dilatation of arteries and venas, you have retinal extraretinal hemorrhages, which are the most common findings. You might get exudates, even hard exudates and cotton wool spots. Since anemia is a procoagulant state, you get CRBOs, CRAOs, even AIN. Even rarely you can get Roth spots or even macular star also.
That's right, Karthik. We stop there. Karthik, I think we stop here because the point you wanted to make has been very well made, because the other other two speakers are going to get less time. Right? I have to stick to my time, and that's wonderful. That's okay. Fantastic. Right? The point is, you can give the take-home message, please. Yes.
So this is an IIH and is still a diagnosis of exclusion. You should never underestimate the common medical conditions. And still, even in this era of telemedicine, nothing substitutes a good clinical history and a good examination.
Very good, Karthik. I think it's a fabulous case presentation. I would grade it A+, to be very honest, because the point that you have tried to make is, I think from this is that if you correct anemia, that itself is medical ONSF. It's medical ONSF. Did this patient undergo an ONSF subsequently?
Subsequently, she did, sir, but there was not much improvement in the.
But in any case, the patient had made a significant, there was a significant reversal just by rectifying her anemia.
Yes.
Just replenishing her hemoglobin.
Yes. Next
case, please. Fantastic. And that's the point is very, very taken. The moral of the story is, in all IIH patients, you must have a look at the hemoglobin. Honestly, I don't. And I'm sure many would be like me who don't. But such a low hemoglobin giving rise to such severe IIH, such severe, and such a significant reversal in visual outcome simply by correcting, hemoglobin is a fantastic take-home message. Thank you. Next case, please. I think who's the next one?
I am, sir.
Yeah, please, Dr. Divya, please. Good evening.
I'm sharing the slides, sir.
Hmm?
Are my slides visible, sir?
Yes, please.
Good evening, sir. Thank you very much, APNO, for giving me an opportunity to present the case. So this is a simple case, and I am sure that the residents will be able to answer me very quickly after sir's discussion. So moving on to the case. So this was a 77-year-old gentleman who presented to us. So he had a history of hypertension and treatment well controlled, and history of coronary artery disease. He had stenting in 2010, and he was on dual antiplatelet therapy. So his symptoms started on 8th of December last year when he had history of transient vision loss in the left eye, and he described it as blackening of vision of his left eye, and he reported that he had complete visual recovery in 5 to 10 minutes, and but he ignored the first symptom and subsequently multiple episodes in the left eye for next 5 days, and there was no symptoms in the right eye. So on 13th, that is 5 days later, he had sudden onset diminution of vision while watching TV. So he immediately consulted an ophthalmologist, and he reported that he could see only the top 3 lines of the visual chart with left eye, and right eye was completely fine. And so he was subsequently referred to neurologist. So he presented to us on 14th, that is almost 6 days after the onset of symptoms, and there was no pain during eye movements. So I want the resident to answer these questions. So we can start with Sharad. So Sharad, how will you approach this patient when he comes to you in the OPD?
Yes, ma'am. This patient has a vascular risk factor and is an elderly patient, and he also had history of recurrent transient visual obscuration, which improve and suggestive of an Amarox physics type of phenomenon. And subsequently, he had lower altitudinal field defect, suggestive of a ocular ischemic syndrome, like AAN like picture, and the vision loss was also painless, which suggests an AAN like picture. Non-arthritic AAN-like picture.
Yeah, right. So he initially presented with transient monocular vision loss, and which subsequently became permanent vision loss, and it was painless. So, so you think it is related to vascular risk factors, and probably it is a vascular etiology. Any other things in your mind at this point? I will give subsequent history in subsequent slides.
No, ma'am.
Okay. So in vascular etiology, so what are your differential at this point? Any other differentials? And at the vascular, you want to be more specific at this point?
Vascular etiologies, I would put a possibility of a non-arthritic AON or a branched retinal artery occlusion, or a venous BR-VIVO can also present with altitudinal defects, and yes, ma'am, these are the possibilities I would keep.
So keeping in this mind, we will move forward. So the things to be seen. So if this is a patient with vision loss, so we have to first see whether it is monocular, binocular vision loss. So this can give us clue whether it is anterior or posterior visual pathway defect. So most of the chiasmal and retrochiasmal lesions we usually present with binocular lesion, and the anterior visual pathway defects. If bilateral, it can again cause binocular vision loss, and if it is usually the anterior visual pathway in one set presents with monocular vision loss. And you have to see whether the vision loss is transient or persist, and whether it is static or progressive, and always see the temporal profile, whether it is acute, subacute, or chronic. Always look for associated features, ask for triggers, and also the pattern of vision loss. So the clinical clues. So again, I'm repeating again. So this is a temporal profile. You have to ask whether it is acute, subacute, or chronic. Any associated features like any headache, any focal neurological deficit, any history of seizures, any jaw claudication, systemic features, whether there is any precipitating features, and whether vision loss is waking up. So what is the importance of waking up, vision loss and waking up? Akash, can you tell me? Sir has talked in his talk also about this.
Yes, ma'am. Vision loss and waking up usually is a feature of non-arthritic AON, as sir told in the lecture, that during sleep there is fall in the blood pressure, and when the patient wakes up, this thrombus is formed, and sometimes when the patient wakes up, this causes a non-arthritic ischemic optic neuropathy, ma'am.
Yeah, actually, the non-arthritic ischemic optic neuropathies, it is mainly due to the hypoperfusion. So there will be an external blood pressure drop, and the patient usually present with a waking up vision loss. So coming back to the case, we probed his history, keeping in mind these points. So there was history of intermittent left hemicranial headache since almost 4 weeks prior to the admission. There was no history of any vomiting or double vision. He had no constitutional symptoms. We specifically asked for jaw claudication. No history of any transient motor sensory symptoms, no weight loss, joint pain, rashes, and no prior episodes in the past. So his hypertension was well controlled and he was on treatment. He had history of coronary artery disease and he was on dual antiplatelet therapy. He was not a diabetic. He was a reformed smoker and his family history was also unremarkable. So Kanchana, can you tell me what are the causes of transient monocular vision loss at this point?
Yes, ma'am. With respect to this case, since he has this history of recent onset change in his pattern of headache with left hemicranial headaches, one cause would be arthritic. I would also consider, considering his age, I would also consider arthritic AION. And otherwise, cause of monocular vision loss and transient, that it can be either because of ocular causes like like in raised ICT and papilledema, they can have TBOs. Or it can be other neurological causes like migraine and or it can be because of peripheral, unlikely because of peripheral causes like hypertension. More commonly because of this vascular events only, like embolic processes.
So let's see. So this I learned from Lal sir only. So this is a case of in patients with transient monocular vision loss, the most important ocular cause is angular closure glaucoma. And as you Dr. Kanchana already told, the important vascular causes include thrombotic embolism, hypoperfusion, all these things we have to see. And the TVOs and Utto phenomena, these can cause both monocular and binocular transient vision loss. And always see for the duration of episodes. And the transient binocular vision loss is seen with like again in vascular causes, in occipital epilepsy, and in some cases of complex migraine. So Amrita, can you tell me the characteristic feature of retinal migraine? How does it present?
Retinal migraine, usually the patient's predominant complaint is headache, which is temporal and throbbing in character. And
regarding the vision loss?
The vision loss usually accompanies these episodes, and the vision loss lasts for a few hours. And with the relief of the headache, there is improvement in the vision loss.
So usually it's the transient vision loss in migraine starts in the periphery and moves towards the center. That is characteristic of retinal migraine. Okay. So the other causes, like if it is a persistent monocular vision loss, so you have to see whether it is whether the patient is having a relative afferent pupillary defect. If yes, it means that is optic nerve involvement, and if there is no RAPD, the problem may be in the retina or it can be a functional vision loss. So if the patient is having monocular persistent vision loss, what will you do? So you have to see the fundus and decide subsequently. So I am telling you some causes like monocular persistent vision loss with relative afferent pupillary defect. So if the patient is having disc edema, these are the important causes. Optic neuritis, that means anterior optic neuritis, papillitis. The causes being inflammatory, ischemic, infective, and infiltrative, and the other important causes like paraneoplastic and optic nerve tumors. So the starred ones, that is inflammatory causes, ischemic causes, infectious causes, and infiltrative causes will present with disc edema and hemorrhage. Whereas the paraneoplastic optic nerve tumors, they will have disc edema, but hemorrhage is quite uncommon. So again, if the patient is having a persistent monocular vision loss, but no with RAPD, but no disc edema. So the differentials include posterior ischemic optic neuropathy, retrobulbar neuritis, and some hereditary neuropathies, and also the paraneoplastic ones. So if the patient is suspected to have a retinal pathology, see the fundus, and the fundus will be abnormal in following cases. If there is a retinal artery occlusion, retinal vein occlusion, retinal detachment, and central serous maculopathy or cystic macular edema. And it will be normal in case of autoimmune or paraneoplastic retinopathy. So with this knowledge, we proceeded to examination. So our patient was a moderately built and well-nourished person, and there was no pallor, icterus, lymph node enlargement, or pedal edema. His vitals were quite stable. So Sharad, any additional general examination finding would you look for in this patient?
I think proceed further. Be quick. Sharath, after this, I think you go
Yes.
on what the patient had, please. Eh?
Yes. Ma'am, I would also look for atherosclerotic vascular risk factors or risk factors of metabolic syndrome or xanthelasmas, and I look for carotid bruit, which would suggest any IC occlusion, and I also look for temporal artery tenderness on the temporal area.
Right.
Yes.
So we also looked for the same, and we found that there was a thick and tender superficial temporal artery on the left side, and he also had a mild scalp tenderness. So we proceeded further with examination. He had normal higher mental function. His visual acuity corrected was 6/6 in the right side. Left eye, he had a left eye that was 6/24, and visual field by confrontation, though inconsistent, we could appreciate defect in his left superior field, and there was left RAPD. So what do you expect to see see in the fundus of this patient? Akash, can you quickly tell me what will be the fundus finding in this patient? You are not audible, Akash.
Ma'am, there would be sectoral optic atrophy setting in with mostly a secondary due to this defect.
So let's see. So this was his fundus. We can see that there was disc edema. The margins were blood, and the disc was quite pale. So I will show you another disc. So considering the disc, I first show you the disc in this disc is again disc edema, but it's quite hyperemic disc, and there are hemorrhages also. So in arthritic AION, there will be pallid disc edema more than hyperemic disc edema, and the cup will be of normal size. Whereas in non-arthritic AION, hyperemic disc edema is more common compared to a pale disc, and the opposite eye will have a small cup, which is called disc atrophy. So in our patient, the fundus in the right eye is normal cup disc ratio. Left eye, there was pale disc edema. Rest of the examination was normal. So what was our clinical diagnosis? So summarizing, we had a 77-year-old male who presented with transient monocular vision loss, which was followed by a persistent vision loss associated with hemicranial headache, thick and tender superficial temporal artery with scalp tenderness, and visual acuity of 6/36 in the affected eye with RAPD, and pale disc edema with normal disc in the right side with the well-controlled risk factors. So we made a diagnosis clinically as anterior ischemic optic neuropathy, and the first probable diagnosis in our case was arthritic AION. And we also thought of non-arthritic AION because of its risk factors, though possibility of arthritic was more because of the above-mentioned features. So I'm skipping this. So I just want to show the difference between arthritic AION and non-arthritic AION. So in the most of the patient present will be of elderly in arthritic AION, and the sex ratio, they say it's more in female than male as per the literature review. There will be some associated features like headache, jaw claudication, abnormal temporal artery zone palpation, and visual acuity usually will have a significant vision loss, not like our patient. Usually the vision loss will be more severe in arthritic AION, and the disc, as I mentioned, will be pale disc edema compared to a hyperemic disc edema, and this patient will have inflammatory markers like very high rise ESR and also high C-reactive protein. And temporal artery biopsy is gold standard, and the fluorescent angiography will show the areas of choroid perfusion as shown in Sir's lecture, and the treatment is corticosteroids. So there are some points to differentiate between AION and optic neuritis. So optic neuritis patient usually will be more of younger population. It will be acute onset. Again, RAPD will be there, but the visual field will be of central defect, and the disc edema will be seen. And hemorrhages are quite unusual, and fundus fluorescent angiography will be normal. And when you do an MRI, you will find optic nerve enhancement. So we proceeded, and his visual field right eye was normal, and left eye we had superior and nasal field defects. And we also had an OCT which shows thinning of the ganglion cell complex, and right ONH was normal. So I'm proceeding further. We got a fundus fluorescent angiography also, and as expected for an arthritic AON, he had choroidal non-perfusion in the nasal part, and in the late stages there were disc leakages and also multiple areas of choroidal hypoperfusion is seen. Actually, I don't have all the images here. So on the blood investigation, we had HB of 12 gram, and quite surprisingly, his ESR was normal, multiple values, and CRP was elevated, and rest of the investigations were normal. We got a CT head and neck vessel. There was no significant stenosis or occlusion, and his MRI brain showed only small vessel changes. His other cardiac evaluation was also normal. So on one last question, Amrita can answer this. So what will be your next step? What do you do next?
One is I would empirically start treatment with steroids since we are suspecting an arteritic AION.
Divya, you please proceed further because we have the next case and then we have Rohit Bhatia's lecture. Please.
Yes, sir. So we have started her chemo with IV methylprednisolone, followed by oral steroids, and subsequently his visual acuity improved from 6/24 in the left eye to 6/9, and headache also significantly improved. And later on, we got a superficial temporal artery biopsy, and it was consistent with the giant cell arteritis. So final diagnosis, anterior ischemic optic neuropathy, giant cell arteritic type, giant cell arteritis, and at follow-up at 6 months, there was no headache or no further visual deterioration. The opposite eye is completely normal, and he is on Viceron, mycophenolate mofetil, and antiplatelet. So I'm skipping this. So my take-home messages are: if a patient is diagnosed suspected to have anterior ischemic optic neuropathy, so the crucial step is to differentiate between arthritic and non-arthritic. Usually, arthritic AION will present with a massive vision loss and amaurosis fugax, as Sir rightly told in the previous 1 week, usually suggestive of arthritic AION, and you will get systemic and hematological abnormalities associated. But remember, 21% patient may present without systemic features. A normal ESR doesn't rule out GCA. And chalky white disc edema, almost diagnostic of arthritic AON, and fundus fluorescent angiography will further show you PC occlusion, temporal artery biopsy, gold standard. Early suspicion you should manage with systemic high-dose steroids, and high index of suspicion as judged from systemic features, and high-dose steroid to be started immediately, and steroid therapy to be further regulated by clinical features and inflammatory markers. So that's it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Divya. I think the important take-home message is you can have arthritic AION with a normal ESR. That's the most important message here. The CRP was elevated, and that's arthritic AION because of biopsy and because of the fact that this patient was having recurrent episodes of hallmark of arthritic AION. This generally does not occur in NAION. And of course, you had a pale disc edema. Very appropriately said. Well done. Thank you very much for the lovely information. Over to you, Ask.
Thank you, sir. And thank you to the organizers of APNU, and thank you, dear my dear friends Anu and Vishnu, Dr. Padma and Professor Lal. So the purpose of this case, which I'm just going to present, so okay. Is the screen visible now? The purpose of this case is not just to tell you about the diagnosis, but also to instigate some important points, and so that you see more than what you usually see. So just starting with the case. So we had this young 15-year-old boy who came to general emergency with history of diminution of vision in one eye, that is the left eye, for 12 hours, of 12 hours duration. When we went into the history was that the patient, while playing with his friend, noted that suddenly the vision loss occurred in his left eye. There was no pain at the onset, but yes, the patient did complain of some pricking sensation over the left side of forehead by the time he presented to the hospital. He had some associated doubtful initial color desaturation, and there were no other complaints. There was no significant past history. On examination, it was almost normal neurological, systemic, and general physical examination, except this. So what was this? On general physical examination, the patient was having some scar marks over here, which you can just observe. And when we asked the patient that why were these formed and why were these there, he did tell us that he had some vesicular eruptions over the left side of the forehead around 10 to 15 days back. No treatment was taken, and this was the remnant of those vesicular eruptions. The patient did have some edema, which you can just see over here beneath this lid, and he did have this conjunctival congestion. And along with that, you may notice that the patient was having dilated pupils, and the patient indeed had relative afferent pupillary defect with a very, very low vision of hand movements close to face. And this is what we saw when we saw the fundus. So now, having discussed so many fundi, so I think one of you can just tell me about the important findings very quickly so that I proceed to the next slide. So maybe Dr. Akash, are you there? I mean, you can talk about what are the important fundus findings very quickly.
And there is hemorrhagic, there is diffuse hemorrhage present all over the fundus and the optic disc, ma'am. There is blood disc margins.
Very good. Yes.
The vessels look a bit
tortuous is the term
yes.
you mean to say? Yes.
Yes,
Can you
ma'am.
tell me what is this? Is this a vein or is this an artery? Is this a
vein, ma'am?
yes? So these are the darker ones are the retinal veins, which are very, very tortuous, and they're broken in between, right?
Yes,
Maybe something in case this was an MRI, we would have called it a beaded vessel as well. What else? What about these vessels?
Ma'am,
Are these veins or are these arteries? Can you just comment?
these are arteries, ma'am. These
Very
are,
good. And what has happened to the arteries? Look at the caliber.
they
Look
are,
at the
yes,
thinned
ma'am,
out,
actually,
fine streaks,
yes,
right?
ma'am.
And what is hair? What was supposed to be hair? Let me call it that way.
Macula was supposed.
Macula, yeah. So even the macula is not visible. And
Yes,
what are these whitish spots you are seeing? Look here.
Ma'am, these are hard
Exactly. So these are exudates, or these are infarcts which are getting.
Yes, ma'am.
Right.
Fiber
So,
layer.
yeah.
Yes.
So one last question: what is the type of this hemorrhage? You have seen so many hemorrhages since the beginning of this session. So what is the type of this hemorrhage?
Ma'am, type of this
Okay.
usually seen in infective.
Let me just put it this way. Do you feel it is a streaky hemorrhage, a splinter hemorrhage, a dot and blot hemorrhage, or a blotchy hemorrhage? Blotchy hemorrhage, as if somebody has just spilled some ketchup over the optic disc. Am I right? This is exactly how it is looking. So great. So yeah. So I'm moving to the next slide because of the want of time. So quickly, Dr. Amrita, can you just, I've just listed down everything for your comfort. Which one out of all these would you pick up?
Infectious, ma'am.
Infectious, very good. Anything else?
Um,
Do you mean neuroretinitis? Should I put it that way?
yes, ma'am.
So in
Infectious.
neuroretinitis, would you have bad disc or would you have bad retina?
Retina, ma'am. Here we have the disc as well as the retina. Both of them are involved.
Yes, so that is exactly the point I wanted to highlight over here. So if you see in this particular patient, you have a bad disc and something bad which is going on around this disc as well. And you also see some obscured vessels and some damaged vessels or some hemorrhagic spots in the retina as well. So, next slide. So definitely it is not a typical optic neuritis, and very quickly, why is it not a typical optic neuritis? Because it is hyperacute, 1. 2, why? Because we had some doubtful signs of anterior segment inflammation, the conjunctival congestion the patient was having. And 3, why? Because the patient is having hemorrhages. So hemorrhages are not a sign of a typical optic neuritis, which I and everybody else has learned from Sir time and time over and over again. So what should be the next step? Sarath, would you want to tell us what would you do out of all these options, or in case you have some option of your own, would you order directly a FFA, MRI brain, CSF, vitreous tap, maybe somebody had an infection?
Ma'am, actually, there is a suggestion of venous occlusion, which would have led to this ketchup sauce appearance, and so FFA could lead to diagnosis. And at the same time, I would also like to do an MRI with optic nerves also.
Okay, great.
To look for the.
This is all what is going on day one of this patient's presentation. And on day one, okay, so let me just one more thing. Yeah. So I'm so sorry. So the slide I had put, because one important step was left, even I forgot while I was talking to you, that what was missing was that we haven't yet examined the peripheral retina. So like somebody mentioned about some neuroretinitis, infection, what you should not forget is also to examine the peripheral retina. It has its own importance. And now see, this peripheral retina, the patient is having some small dot and blot hemorrhages over here, but more or less the basic brunt is being suffered by this optic disc and the macula. So this was one important point you should remember. Do think of examining the peripheral retina in actually all the patients. And one more thing, before you get a FFA done, would you start the patients on empirical steroids or would you wait? Dr. Amrita, I would want to come back to you. You talked about infectious cause. So would you want to wait till the time we have ruled that out, or would you want to go with the empirical steroids at this juncture?
Since it is hyperacute and vision threatening, I would like to give him empirical steroids.
Okay, so I'm very happy. But in our case, this patient on the same day was referred to an ophthalmologist from the emergency, thinking that the patient might be having some vascular occlusion rightly. And the ophthalmologist directly went ahead. He was lucky enough that FFA was done on the very second day. And look, what we can see over here is we cannot see most of the disc because of this bad hemorrhage which was there. And look at these vessels, they are hardly filling at 12 seconds. I will not go into the detail of this FFA, but what you can easily see is that the arteries are hardly getting filled up. And even late, after 1.5 minutes also, the patient's retinal veins are also not filling properly. Okay? And this is what is known as frosted branch angiitis. When you see that it's just like the branches of a tree, tortuous veins, along with lots and lots of leakage occurring. And this is OCT. And you can just see this is the right side and this is the left side optical coherence tomograph. And how raised is this? So definitely the patient was having bad hemorrhages. Definitely the patient was having delayed arterials and the venous filling. And definitely the patient was having lots of hemorrhage. So the dermatology consultation was taken by the eye people. And as expected, the patient was thought to be having a varicella dermatitis. The patient was started on acyclovir thinking that the patient was having a combined retinal vein and a combined retinal artery occlusion. The patient was started on acyclovir and aspirin. All the investigations of the patients were sent, and over the time, the results came over 2 to 5 days, and they were more or less normal. But what happened on day 3 was that the patient lost whatever vision he was having to no light perception. And then the patient was re-referred to neurologist. So next step, as Sharath rightly pointed out, was to get an MRI done. But before we got an MRI done, what I wanted to highlight over here was that in CRVO, what we usually get is more of retinal hemorrhages. And this is exactly what is called a blood and thunder appearance, what you can see over here. But in our case, the hemorrhages were more predominant on the optic disc. And this is what the ophthalmologists thought, that the hemorrhages at disc were out of proportion. The disc edema was out of proportion to what they would usually see in CRVO. And hence the patient was referred to us. And what we got done was this MRI. What you see over here is a representative image. And what you see over here was what our patient had. So this is a contrast enhanced MRI of the optic nerves. And what you can see is that the sheath of the optic nerve is enhancing. There is an intense enhancement of this optic nerve sheath. Just to make it clear, this is a T2 weighted image in which you can see this optic nerve going over here. And this is the CSF filled optic sheath. This is a contrast image where you were not expecting to see sheath in a normal circumstance, like in the right optic nerve. But look at the left optic nerve. I would like to repeat that there is an intense enhancement of only the sheath and leaving the optic nerve more or less to a normal optic nerve. And this is known as a tram track sign when only the optic nerve sheath is enhancing, or on a coronal image, only optic nerve sheath enhancement makes it look like a donut, and it is known as a donut sign. And this is typically the optic perineuritis, which we see on the MRI. CSF analysis was done. The pressures was normal. There was no cell, but proteins were exquisitely high. They were 78 milligram per deciliter. And the final diagnosis which was made was that of left eye combined the retinal artery and the retinal vein occlusion with optic perineuritis, probably post or para-infectious, probably post VZV infection. The patient was now given methylprednisolone, thinking that the perineuritis was also hampering, was also causing contribution, was also giving contribution to the vision loss, and the patient improved subtly after a few days to PL positive, but the hemorrhages in the peripheral retina increased because of the ongoing central retinal vein occlusion. Hence, the patient was also given anti-VEGF agents, and by day 15, the patient's retinal and the optic disc image little settled down, but the patient remained only to PL positive image. Subsequently, when he came to us after 3 months, only minimal gain of vision was seen. But importantly, if it was an infection, the patient still had the other eye normal, and we believe that the patient's other eye remained normal because we did intervene on day 1 or 2 of the patient presenting. So quickly, this is what you see in various types of disc hemorrhage. What I want you to think is just think out of the box. So this is the pale disc with hemorrhage, ischemic hemorrhage. This is splinter hemorrhages. Look at these flame-shaded hemorrhages with cotton exudates along the vessels. This is hypertensive hemorrhage. Look at this hemorrhage. This is disc edema with peripapillary hemorrhages. Look at this hemorrhage. This is subhyaloid hemorrhage. Something like a Terson syndrome, which you see in sudden increase of ACP. Look at this image. This is infiltrative disc with hemorrhages. And look at our patient's hemorrhage, which was a blotchy hemorrhage, suggesting that there was something more which was going on in the form of central retinal vein occlusion. Also, I would again like to point out that optic perineuritis suggests inflammation. Inflammation both in the eye as well as in the brain structures. It suggests that the sheath is getting inflamed, which means that this inflammation can spread to both orbital structures and CNS structures like meninges and CSF. And that brings me to the last slide of my talk. So the learning points are that yes, look at the peripheral retina. Remember that both neurologists and ophthalmologists are concerned when optic disc swelling is there. Think of all the causes of disc edema with hemorrhages when you face such a patient. And yes, remember that optic perineuritis is a part of a generalized inflammatory syndrome, and it is not synonymous with optic neuritis. Thank you. Now, sir, would you want to comment more?
That's okay. I think we have the comments at 8:30. I think it's a fantastic presentation. The last 2 slides were the most important. I must honestly confess, you've shown all types of hemorrhages. And this case is an excellent demonstration of what a simple, innocuous, forgotten viral illness of the skin can do to the eye. That's important. So it's important that when you get such patients, you must take a proper history and examination. And you picked up a very good sign. Beyond that, everything fell in line, because the moment you saw the varicella zoster lesions, you knew what you are going to expect and rest automatically forward. Thank you so much, Asta. It's a fantastic presentation. I'm actually delighted at all the 3 cases which have been discussed. They are fabulous. Over to you. Back to you, Anand. Yeah. Rohit is getting angry. I mean, look at his proptosis. I always said Rohit has reversible proptosis of his eyeball. One of the causes of reversible proptosis is Rohit Bhatia's eyes. Yes, Rohit. Sorry.